afternoon, everybody. Feel free to continue with your lunch. I'm just going to go ahead and get the program started this afternoon. Thank you all for coming out today. Hopefully one of these days we'll have some beautiful sunshine, but what a beautiful view that we have, as always, from Mistwood Golf Course. So thank you again for hosting Mistwood. We love being here, and it's such a beautiful course. So whenever you get a chance, please come on out, enjoy McWethy's, enjoy their golf course. It's a beautiful, beautiful facility. I wanted to take a moment to introduce some dignitaries and special guests that we have with us today. We have Senator Jennifer Bertino-Tarrant, Will County Board Member Laura Staley-Ferry, Village of Romeo Trustee Ken Griffin and Lou Aguirre, Assistant Village Manager and Board Liaison Don Caldwell, our Chamber Board President Scott Poynton from the White Oak Library District, Chamber Board Past President Tom Hess from Citgo, and another Chamber Board member, Dr. Yolanda Farmer from Joliet Junior College. So thank you all for joining us today. We have a special guest speaker today, and we are very happy to welcome Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow. Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow is the longest-serving state's attorney in Will County. He has a long and distinguished career during which he has implemented groundbreaking initiatives to investigate, prosecute, and prevent crime. Among these initiatives, State's Attorney Glasgow formed Will County's first gang prosecution unit in the early 1990s and organized gang sweeps that dramatically reduced local gang shootings, and he was featured on Peter Jennings' World News Tonight. He pioneered Will County's first specialized domestic violence court, which mandated abusers counseling to prevent the destructive cycle of violence. He formed a financial crimes prosecution unit to assist victims of financial exploitation, theft, identity theft, or loan fraud, with an emphasis on protecting senior citizens. And he purchased 2 new ADA accessible shuttle buses for use by the Veterans Assistance Commission of Will County to transport local veterans from Joliet to Hines VA Hospital, where they receive necessary medical services. State's Attorney Glasgow received his Juris Doctorate from Northern Illinois Law School in DeKalb. He has been practicing law since 1981. He is here today to talk about initiatives by his office to ensure that Will County remains a safe community in which local businesses can thrive. Please join me in welcoming Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow.
I'd like to start out with just a little 6-minute video that we put together through our Children's Advocacy Center. How many people know what our Children's Advocacy Center does? Okay, how many people have heard of it? Okay, now it's the place where we investigate sexual abuse cases against children. It would be great if we could call it the Children's Sexual Abuse Center, but that would be, I think, a little bit untoward as far as the community is concerned. So, but it's important that everyone know about it because there are so many cases of unreported sexual abuse of children. We'll never know the exact number. But when we see, when some children get the courage to come forward, we see all of the things that keep that repressed, the fear, the embarrassment. Many times the child is told, if you tell anyone, I will kill you. Now, how does a child, navigate through something like that? So we've got therapy dogs that we brought in about 6 or 7 years ago. I was talking with my administrative assistant about some articles I had read about hospitals using therapy dogs and how it speeded recovery in the hospital. And I thought, these children, they come into our center and they're traumatized, they're scared. What's the thing that will take them somewhere else? A puppy, a dog. I've got 3 dogs at home myself, and every night when I open the laundry room door, there's 3 living things there to greet me. I saw something on the internet saying that dogs obviously love unconditionally, and that's something that we humans could learn from with all the strife that we have going in our society today. Our dogs are there to make us happy, to serve us, and they do a phenomenal job with these children. One young girl had come to the center with her brother to tell about her abuse, but she couldn't get the courage up that day. She had played with Jackson, our yellow lab, and really had a lot of fun. And about a week later, she said to her mom, I'd like to go back there and play with Jackson and tell what happened to me. And she did. So if Jackson never did another thing, that child's abuser was prosecuted and would not have been, except for that intervention. We had one of the parents who was really, really stressed out when she came in. She was crying. And she sat down and she started petting Jackson and then just let out a big sigh and said, I can just feel the stress leaving my body playing with this dog. So the studies are voluminous as to what I'm talking about, but I'd just like you to see this video. I think it will be very informative, especially since most everyone in the room really doesn't know anything about the Child Ad Center. Hello, I'm Will County State's Attorney Jim Glasgow. I'd like to introduce you to some very unique and hard-working employees in the Will County State's Attorney's Office. They're all members of my League of Extraordinary Canines. It is our mission in the Will County State's Attorney's Office to keep our communities safe by prosecuting, investigating, and preventing crime. An important part of our mission is to serve the needs of crime victims, especially vulnerable children who have been sexually abused or exploited. The Children's Advocacy Center is where young victims come to give statements we use as evidence to convict child predators. We've made the center a comfortable and inviting place for children and family members who are struggling through the greatest trauma in their lives. The children give their recorded statements to a skilled and gentle interviewer in a neutral and non-suggestive environment. Since I established the center in 1995, these statements have been used to convict thousands of abusers. We also provide counseling and other services to victims and family members so the healing can begin. We like to say we bring hope, healing, and justice to abused children. In 2012, we brought Jackson to the center to comfort children who had been sexually abused. He visits with them before and after the recorded interviews with our trained and compassionate staff. When Jackson first started with my office, he was a 2-year-old yellow Labrador Retriever. He was in training to be a leader dog for the blind. However, he had to be reassigned because he had a penchant for squirrels. So Jackson's owner, Sherry Johnson, began training him as a therapy dog and taking him to local hospitals to comfort patients. I asked Sherry if we could put Jackson to work comforting kids. It was the start of our Pause for Kids pet therapy program, and it was a huge success right from the start. In one case, a 6-year-old girl who had been sexually abused played with Jackson at the center, but she was unable to talk about her traumatic experience during her interview. A week later, she asked to return to make a statement because of her friendship with Jackson. When she arrived, Jackson was there to greet her. She hugged him and called him her best friend. As the program developed, Sherry brought her other therapy dog, Mally, to work at the center also. Both Jackson and Mally are licensed through Therapy Dog International. A few years ago, we were fortunate enough to acquire Kiwi, a 3-year-old black English lab. Kiwi is a licensed facility dog with special national certification from Assistance Dog International. She graduated from Support Dogs Incorporated in St. Louis, Missouri. Like Jackson and Mally, she greets and comforts children who come to the center for interviews and services. She is also trained to accompany children to court hearings and sit quietly with them on the witness stand when they testify at trial. The use of these therapy dogs proved so effective with children that we started to think of other creative ways to utilize their services. So when we qualified to receive another highly trained dog from Support Dogs Incorporated, we jumped at the chance. Angus is another black English lab who works primarily in our problem-solving courts. These include drug court, veterans court, mental health court, and adult redeploy Illinois court. Each court is designed to rehabilitate offenders and place them on the path to productive citizenship. These are highly structured programs that provide court monitoring, treatment, and counseling to qualifying offenders who have been cycling in and out of the prison system. we're tackling the heroin epidemic head-on in our problem-solving courts. I'm proud to say that we've helped hundreds of people break the cycle of addiction, find work, and return to their families. This includes many veterans who have struggled with their lives after returning from service. Angus is a friendly face at group meetings and counseling sessions. He reduces stress for court participants, and he sometimes provides comic relief. He's an important partner for our counselors. He's helping people get back on track. Our 4 comfort dogs also attend many community events and fundraisers to raise awareness and money for organizations that deal with child sexual abuse, domestic violence, and other crime prevention programs. These loving dogs always attract a crowd at local events. These aren't the only hardworking dogs in my office. A few years ago, I learned about detection dogs that are trained to find hidden electronic devices like thumb drives, SD cards, and cell phones. They can smell a proprietary chemical that companies use when making these devices. I knew right away a dog like this would help our investigators in my Crimes Against Children unit as they build cases against predators who trade child pornography over the internet. These tiny devices are easily hidden, making it hard for investigators to find them while executing search warrants. In 2016, we brought Cash to work in the unit. We were the first agency in Illinois to put an electronics detection dog in the field. Cash was trained by an Indiana firefighter who pioneered the training of these dogs. One of his dogs helped put fast food pitchman Jared Fogle in prison after sniffing out hidden devices inside his mansion. Cash is a 75-pound black lab who lives with my investigator, Megan Brooks. Megan trains Cash every day and rewards his successes with food. He's been on 18 searches and he's found all kinds of devices. There you have it, my League of Extraordinary Canines. Stop by and meet them sometime. If you would have told me 10 years ago that I would employ 5 dogs at the state's attorney's office, I would have said you're crazy. But we do, and they do a tremendous service to the public. And Jackson Malley worked for the taxpayers at no expense to the taxpayers. Sherry is my administrative assistant. They were her personal dogs, and we used them for about 4 years. Both Angus and Malley are $30,000 to $40,000 service dogs that we received from the facility in St. Louis. We sent our team down there. They had to bond with the dog and come back. And our commitment is we will use the dogs for the stated purpose at the Child Ad Center. There was another law enforcement officer that was down there at the same time to receive a dog, and they didn't get along with the dog, and they went home empty-handed. So it's not an automatic that you get the dog, but the people that we have in our office are so passionate in their relationship with the dogs that it makes everything work that much better. I want to just talk just real briefly about Cash. Lake County, Mike Neerheim up in Lake County, if you're watching, every time I do something, Mike does it. So after we had the therapy dogs, he started doing the therapy dogs, and then when he saw that I had an electronic detection dog, he's got one. So they're the only 2 in Illinois. But it's good to have 2 because all the federal agencies, we work with DEA, FBI, ATF, and then our local agencies, Cash has been all over northern Illinois doing searches. And it's the Crimes Against Children unit that we opened in 2012. The Attorney General has the licensing for the Illinois Crimes Against Children activity, and Megan Brooks is certified by them to do these investigations. And we opened the center, or the unit, in 2012, and we've had over 150 arrests of individuals creating, trading child pornography. And in about 20% of those cases, we determined that that individual had molested a child, and charges were brought for that also. So it's people want to say it's a victimless crime. There's nothing farther from the truth. Every time a child pornography movie is shown, those children are victimized again. And when I say child pornography, I don't want to, since this is going to be on cable TV, it is anything your mind can conceive is in these movies. It's the most grotesque material. Anyone who watches that and gets any kind of satisfaction from it is mentally disturbed. And the only crime that you can be held past your prison sentence is sexual crimes. If you are determined to be a danger to the public as a sexual predator, you can be held in a civil facility after you're released from prison. So there's clear scientific evidence as to the danger of reoffending by these individuals. And so we had one guy that we caught, David Vaxtel. In 1996, Dave Margliano, where are you at? Anyway, Dave Margliano, who's here with me today, was with me back in 96, and I sent up to Jim Ryan's ICAC to be certified. And he came back, and there was some investigators from the Postal Service that had a picture of two little girls, and they knew they were connected to this Wonderland Club, which was a worldwide child pornography club. But they couldn't determine who these girls were, and Dave was able to determine that. Ironically, you talk about a divine intervention. He was able to determine what municipality they came from, and we were able to make that case. And David Vaxtel had 80 gigabytes of child porn in his bedroom, a 10 by 10 room in his parents' house on the west side of Joliet back in 1996. And he was hooked up with over 300 people worldwide who were trading child pornography over the internet. And what they would do is you would go to another member's computer, and in order to take some of their material, you'd have to deposit some of yours. So everyone's collection grew, so to speak. But when they did the sweep, I think there was over 210 people indicted around the world through this Wonderland Club. So we sent David Vaxtel to prison. In about 3 years, about a year into our unit in 2016, Megan Brooks picked up this individual trading child porn, got the IP address. We hit the residence, and it's David Vaxtel. He got out of prison, and he was back doing it again. He rented an apartment right across from one of our local hospitals so he could see the children coming and going. And the FBI agents that were there were unnerved by this guy because his behavior was so aberrant. And the FBI guys are pretty tough. And just as far as the FBI goes, what you're seeing on TV is not what the FBI is. What happened in the top in Washington, D.C. is not who they are. I've worked with these guys for 35 years. They're stoic, they're honest, they're trustworthy, they don't accuse anybody of anything. They do their jobs, and they do it quietly. And the only time anyone would know that they're doing something is when the indictment is returned. They don't hold press conferences, is what I'm saying. So I just wanted to say that in defense of the FBI. So we're going to be working with them and the other federal agencies in the very near future. I'm going to segue a little bit here. We've had a spat of shootings, just random shootings in Will County by gang members. And a lot of them are not being solved because they're just shooting at each other and then driving away. And fortunately, they're such bad shots that no one has been struck. But every once in a while, there is somebody seriously injured or killed. I was recently at a local facility, and 4 blocks away, a murder took place, a gang murder. And we very fortunately solved that case. The Joliet Police Department worked overtime, and we had some citizens come forward, which is critical. But I've talked to the U.S. Attorney. The new U.S. Attorney, by the way, is John Lausch. Has anybody ever heard of John Lausch? Well, you should know him. He's from Joliet, Illinois. Went to Joliet Catholic High School, went to Harvard. Really, really bright young man, and very passionate about what he does. He was in the FBI or the U.S. Attorney's anti-gang terrorist task force from like 2000 to 2010. Then he went into private practice. But he was selected to be the new U.S. Attorney because of the horrible slaughter that's going on in the Chicago area and some of the unbridled gang activities in the collar counties. And I just want to show you a graph that I'm very proud. Where it is? Oh, there it is. When I first took office back in 1990, the end of 92, one of the things I campaigned on is the gang shootings from 88 to 92 went from about 30 or 40 up around 200. And it was just continuing to go unbridled. So I was committed to starting a gang unit and doing something about it. So we did that. We did an undercover operation, and on December 7th of 1993, we did a sweep. We took out 47 targeted gang members on various charges. And for the next 3 months, we didn't have one shooting. We were having almost one a day, and we didn't have any for 3 months. And then this is a graph indicating what it was like when I came in. We did the sweep here, and then it went down consistently. By 1999, we had it under 100. And again, that's not acceptable, but we continued to knock it down. Now it's starting to come up again, and then we're not really sure why, but some of it has to do with the fragmentation of gangs. And Romeoville is not immune. You don't have certainly the gang problem that Joliet has, or maybe Bolingbrook, but it's here, and it's important that all of our gang investigators work together. They'll be geometrically more effective, when they do that, and we're even going to be, pulling in people from Kankakee and Southern Cook County. We're going to to put together a gang database so that we'll know the day before that they're going to do something before they do it. And we did that back, and I just wanted to show you what we did back in '93 to show you that it's real and it's doable, and that's what we're going to be doing again. So I'm anxious to work with John Lausch because he, again, he's open-minded, he's creative, and he'll take cases federally that'll make a real impact on these local gangs. We do not have the kind of gang problem they have in Chicago, the density, the amount of. Every once in a while, we get a situation where people won't talk, and that's what makes gang cases so difficult to solve. But more and more, the more you solve, and the more you make them safe. And I've always used the money I seize from drug dealers and money launderers to relocate people. We've won a number of gang cases by assuring the eyewitness that they'll be safe, and then we've relocated them, and they've remained safe. So we've got a good history of witness relocation. And I'm hoping in the next year we can knock these shootings right out. And it affects business in Romeoville. It certainly does. When people are looking to relocate and determine where they want to be, if on Broadway Street just south of here there's shootings, that's going to be affected. Anybody here in real estate? Okay. Again, people are always interested in schools and parks and everything else. And certainly gang violence would be something, even if it's not spoken, they read about it in the paper, and they're gonna choose a house maybe in a different location. So I'm not doing it to boost the real estate market, but it's for all of our well-being. And like I said, I went down to get a ward from the All Nations Church on the south end of Joliet, and I drove back at about 6:30 in the evening, and at 6:40, right where I drove, 20 shots were fired at two guys shooting at each other. Now, they didn't hit each other, but I could have been right in the crossfire. And I'm not saying that because I'm worried about myself, but it just shows you no one's immune. When they're going to shoot, when the state's attorney was there, I mean, they don't care. So we're going to make sure that they pay the price that's necessary. And then I've worked very hard to work on rehabilitation for at-risk kids. We've got the Forest Park Center up on the hill, and Terry Darcy, who was a local car dealer, and I partnered, and we bought them 2 transport vans. So that these are young kids that are living in poverty. They have no hope. And I'll never forget, we went up to visit after we had purchased those vans, and they pulled in, and a Joliet officer was driving each one, and the vans were full, and they just took them to Brookfield Zoo. Now that sounds corny maybe, but that was the first time those kids ever went to Brookfield Zoo, and maybe the only time they would ever have a chance to. But now with those vans, they can get to recreational facilities, educational opportunities, sporting events, and playing sports themselves. Because there's a lot of organized, athletic, soccer, baseball, whatever, that they can't afford the equipment and they can't get there. And by us helping them do that, we can save them from falling prey to the gang mentality and the gang recruitment. Sometimes they have no choice but to join. Capri Bibbs. Anybody heard of Capri Bibbs? No? He went to Plainfield North High School. Came out of the inner city. He's in the NFL. Think about that. You know what percentage of football players make it to the NFL? He's a special athlete. And he told a story in an interview about when he was at Plainfield North. He said, yeah, if my mom hadn't moved here, I'd be dead. And he said, I remember going to a wedding where my 11 and 12-year-old cousins brought Glocks to the wedding. He said, that's normal. Okay, that's what we're dealing with here. You know, and when you look at the city of Chicago, which we're inextricably tied to, who would have thought in this day and age that the state that has Gary, Indiana, or the state that has Chicago, which one would be in better financial condition? Well, it's a no-brainer. No, it's not. Indiana's in the black. We're $200 billion or more in debt. So Chicago, with all of its issues, I don't hear anybody up there talking about the real solutions to the problems with the murders that they're having. And that is save the children. It's not blame the police, hire the police, whatever. That's not the answer. That's just a little tiny fraction of what is happening. 2 years ago, they had almost 800 murders. Do you know how many the police solved? Anybody want to guess a percentage? I'm sorry? 15%. 15%. That's staggering. So a detective, and they cut the Detectives Bureau in half a few years ago. So a detective has all these murder cases stacked up from the prior year, and he's only solving 15% of them, and then he gets another 500 or 600 coming in the next year. You talk about overwhelming. It's impossible. It's basically, murder is a crime you can get away with in Chicago right now, and it's a tragedy. But I've talked to people, that have been from those areas, and there are elementary school kids that don't go to school. And the reason they don't go to school is they can't cross certain intersections because of the gang control and the gang territory. Now, you don't hear this on the news, do you? But all of this comes back to us because, we help fund the Chicago schools and many of the other issues that happen there. But prevention dollars, those are the ones that give us the biggest bang for our buck. So I just want to talk about our specialty courts, and I'm really proud of them because we were making little rocks out of big rocks for a long time because it was easy, I guess, and it was costing us a fortune. Every time we put somebody in DOC, it costs about 30 grand a year for them to sit on their rear end in a jail cell, and we all pay for that. And then when they get out of prison, then what are we looking at? If they come, how many have a local business here? You're all the Chamber of Commerce, right? So if a convicted felon walks in your door and fills out an app, you gonna hire him? It's gonna be a tough call, right? Probably not. I mean, the numbers around the country are they're not. So I'm kind of going off script here, Chuck.
It's all right.
So Redeploy Illinois is a program where we take nonviolent property offenders who've been cycling through the prison system. They could have 2, 3, 4, 5 convictions. And we go to them and we say, look, you've got another one pending, you're gonna go back to prison, or you can go through counseling, you can go through job training, and we will get you a job. And we're getting them jobs $30,000, $40,000, which is more than what we pay for them to sit on their butts. And then what do they do with the $30,000 or $40,000? They eat in the local restaurants, they rent an apartment, they buy a car, they become part of the solution. And we got about a 50% success rate at this point. We just got an award from the National Association of Counties for the great program that we have in Will County for Redeploy Illinois. You think about that 50% though, what does that translate to? Let's say it's 10 defendants out of 20. 10 times 30,000, that's $300,000 saved. And then not to mention the fact that they're going to pay taxes and help, reinvigorate the society. A lot of these people that I've been talking about, when they were young, they did something stupid and started a downward spiral and they couldn't get out of it. Those are the ones that we're having success with. There are some sociopaths out there and some psychopaths that we're never going to be able to reach. But that doesn't mean we don't try. We're getting a tremendous bang for our buck in Redeploy Illinois. And the local businesses that have agreed to come on board, The reason they came on board is because we still have a string on these individuals. We place them in their company, and if they do something, if they screw up, we can yank them back and put them in prison. So we have the sword of Damocles over their head. That's something that doesn't exist when they walk out of prison, when they finish their sentence and walk through your door. So that little bit extra, hanging over their head helps keep a lot of them on the straight and narrow. And then once they realize how nice it is to be free, to be able to go to a movie, buy something that they hadn't experienced in a long time, with no warrant out for their arrest, it's a life-changing experience, and it's going to be a tremendous benefit to the community. Drug court. Back in 1998, I saw a federal grant for a drug court. There were about 300 or 400 drug courts nationwide at that time, but it was a judicial grant. So I walked across the street and I asked the chief judge if I could write the grant because he doesn't have any staff. And I said, I'll shoulder the burden on that, and let's see if we can get this. And it was amazing. We got the grant, and back in 2000, we opened, and a young lady went through the court back in 2000, and she avoided a felony conviction. She went to college, she went to law school, and I hired her as a prosecutor in my office. Now, you tell me a more fairy tale story than that. It doesn't exist. So that's the kind of thing we can do in this society if we just open our eyes and have a little bit of compassion, not blind compassion. It has to be tempered with responsibility at the same time. But the drug court also, with the heroin problem that we've had, and I want to mention something to you, and I'll be willing to, I want to send this article to your chamber agency, and maybe you can distribute it. Catherine Friddle wrote an article. I got a barking bone. What do you think? Catherine Friddle. She was a very strong supporter of Barack Obama, and she wrote this article with great difficulty because she had to criticize what happened during his administration. She's not personally holding him responsible, but there were things that happened, and it started under Bush. There was a young man named Brownlee, John Brownlee, who was a U.S. attorney in the southern part of Virginia. And he, in 2001, saw that Purdue Pharmaceuticals was just completely committing fraud about the fact that their drug OxyContin was not addictive. And it was great for long-term pain care. Well, it's the most addictive manufactured pharmaceutical. And after about 3 months, it stops killing the pain, and you just need more and more and more. Does anyone in this room know somebody that got in trouble with OxyContin? I do. Outside of my professional life, personally, I know 2 kids whose lives got ruined. They had surgery, they got OxyContin, they got addicted, and they couldn't stop. And now the next gateway is heroin. So Catherine Friddle's article is really scary because it's on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, in Washington, D.C. For the last 10 years, all the wrong people were at the DEA, the Justice Department, and FDA. They all had connections to the money. And when you read this article, it's going to make you sick because people who actually even represented Purdue Pharmaceuticals were in the Justice Department. So anyway, Brownlee's doing his thing. He's doing a great job. He's a young kid. I think he went to Yale or Harvard. He was in the military. He's strident. He wants to do the right thing. And he's right up to the point where he's either going to go to trial against Purdue or settle it. And he's thinking about settling it for over $600 million in fines and penalties. He gets a call from D.C. They tell him, back off. Well, the woman who made the call from the pharmaceutical companies to get this favor wound up, I think she was appointed to head up the FDA later. So thankfully, Mr. Brownlee said, "Excuse me, but did your supervisor tell you to call me?" He said, "No." He said, then butt out. He went forward and he settled it for the $635 million, and his name wound up on a list of 8 U.S. attorneys to be fired by Alberto Rodriguez under Bush. Now think about that. That's the insidiousness of the inner politics up in D.C. Here's a kid who's a patriotic kid. He went in the military. He's smart. He ran for Attorney General the next year in Virginia and didn't win. And you know what he's doing now? He's using that zeal and that intelligence to represent the pharmaceutical companies. Now, again, I don't want to condemn John Brownlee, but that's how things happen. Here you had a kid, he was probably so disillusioned by the fact that they were going to fire him for doing the right thing that he took a different path. But he's taken his expertise on the other side. And again, everyone's has the right to an excellent defense attorney. I'm not saying that at all. But it's sad that a kid that did or a young man that did what he did and was so successful on behalf of us, then took his skills to the other side because of all that pressure there. Instead of being rewarded and patted on the back. So the only reason I mentioned that is I was going around when I give talks on heroin in the drug court, and I was bragging about this big $635 million punishment that the Justice Department did to Purdue, and then I'm thinking, but wait a minute, they didn't stop. They went back and did it again, and now I'm suing them, along with Lake County and Kane County and DuPage, Cook. Counties all over the country now are suing Purdue Pharmaceutical and a half a dozen other pharmaceutical companies that have deliberately made tens of billions of dollars in profits on the backs of our children. You're now 1.5 times more likely to die of a heroin overdose than you are be killed in a car accident. That's how ridiculous it's gotten. And now with fentanyl, which is a synthetic drug, a manufactured drug, but it's 50 times more potent than heroin. It's hard to imagine why these drug dealers are doing, but they're putting fentanyl in the heroin and it kills their buyer. I don't understand that. That's not good economics, is it? But again, that's what's happening. And they're so ruthless just to make the buck. They're putting whatever they can get in it. The heroin itself is over 50% pure. So it's so much more pure than it's ever been that at any given time, a young person can have a fatal overdose. And we're very proud of the fact that we have 2 halfway houses with our drug court. I don't know that there's another county in Illinois, other than maybe Cook, that has that. We had a young girl, very pretty young girl, very promising. She went out on a furlough. She came back, and they found her dead in her room in the drug house. She went out and bought heroin, and it was a dose that was too toxic, too strong, and it killed her. Now, that's the ultimate irony, where a young person has made it through the incarceration phase, the treatment phase. She's in the last leg of this, out looking for a job, and she can't stop the urge. Once you take heroin, it changes your brain chemistry. You're not the same person. You know, I always think I can handle anything. I'm going to be the tough guy, right? Most of us feel that way. We can overcome anything. Not heroin. It changes your brain chemistry. You don't think the same, and your urges are uncontrollable. I see a few older people in the room. Anybody see French Connection, the movie French Connection? Okay. Gene Hackman. Everybody's heard of Gene Hackman, very famous actor. He played Popeye Doyle, who was basically Eddie Egan, this New York cop who was a legend. And he busted the heroin dealers in the first movie. In the second movie, he goes to Europe to attack the French cartel. Ironically, it was the French cartel that was in charge of heroin back then. They capture him. They duct tape him to a chair. They shoot him up with heroin, and he becomes a drooling addict, just begging for more. Here's Superman, Popeye Doyle, the indomitability of the human spirit. One injection of heroin, and he's a different person. He's gone. And I think, you know, when I saw that, it really brought it home to me why we have to treat heroin addicts differently than any other aspect of drug abuse. It's not, they are clearly patients and not addicts. They were ill. And we have saved, I don't know how many heroin addicts, but every drug court graduation, they feel compelled to come up and tell us that if it wasn't for this court, I would be dead. And these are people that we know. It's hard to find someone now that hasn't been touched by this epidemic, and either an uncle or a neighbor or an in-law, somebody. And yeah, sure, go ahead. I'm a real bad slide guy. Chuck worked really hard on these slides, but.
You want to tell them what this is?
Yes, in 2011, the thing we try to pride ourselves in Will County is try to get out ahead of everything as fast as we can. And when we saw that in 2006 we only had 10 fatal overdoses. Last year we had 95. Okay, I mean that's just insane. I mean to have anything grow tenfold. And in 2011 we heard this tape in Homer Glen. We had about 500 people show up for this rally because people were starting to really realize what was going on in our community. And this is a 911 call on a mother who found her son in the shower turning blue.
911, where's your emergency? I need an ambulance right away. My son just overdosed on heroin. What's your age? Please. He's unconscious. Please, hurry. Okay, stay on the phone with me, okay? Okay. Please, hurry. Please, hurry. Is he breathing? I don't know. Why isn't he breathing? Yes, but I can't wake him up. I can't wake him up. Please hurry. Stay on the phone with me. Stay on the phone with me, okay? Okay. Get the ambulance going. Just stay on the phone, okay? You said it's over to heroin, right? Yes. Okay, how old is he? He's 21. Oh my God. I don't know how long he's been unconscious. The bathroom shower was running and I finally just went in there and opened the door. Okay, when did you find him? How long have you been down? How long has he been down? What the hell? Oh my God. My other son said about 30 minutes.
Obviously, that's a parent's worst nightmare. I've got 5 children, and when my 5th child was a couple weeks old, and he stopped breathing and started turning blue, I had a phone call like that I made. I've never experienced anything like that. My wife thought to get that little blue aspirator thing. Children don't know how to breathe through their mouth when they're that young, and his nose was plugged. And she was able to extricate that, and he started breathing just as the paramedics came in. But it's just, every time I hear that, it's your absolute worst nightmare. You know, the one thing that no parent wants to have a child die before them. And but this stuff is, John Roberts is a man who lost his son to heroin. What year was that, Chuck? 09?
He was 29, yeah.
Yeah. And Mark Kirk? Brian Kirk. I knew a guy named Mark Kirk, and every time I try to say Brian Kirk, I say Mark Kirk. Anyway, both of those men live in Homer Glen, live in beautiful homes, and John, he was a 30-year Chicago police officer, was a captain when he retired. His son came to him and said, "Dad, I'm addicted to heroin. I can't stop." And he goes, "Billy, no problem. We're going to beat this." 2 weeks later, he was dead. There was just no stopping it. And Brian Kirk didn't even know his son had a problem, came home and found him dead on the living room floor. Look, that would just, I don't know how these guys survived that, but they did. And they have a group called HERO, Heroin Epidemic Relief Organization. And they've partnered with us and all our summits, and they're out there donating their time, going around the community, informing people about the dangers of heroin. And they've got a, what do you call it?
In plain sight van.
Yeah. Well, it's a what do you call it? A trailer. Yeah. They've got a trailer that's about the size of a 10 by 12 bedroom. And you might think that's silly. You don't need to be instructed on how to search your children's bedroom. Oh, yeah, you do. Nothing that you see anymore is real. I've got a bottle of Aquafina water back at the office. You twist it and pull it, and behind the label, it's all empty. You could put drugs in there. You could put thumb drives, whatever you want to put in there. And it looks like a bottle of water. There's water in the top, water in the bottom. And that's where cash comes in. Can you imagine searching for electronic devices, and there's 5 cases of water in the corner? Everybody does that now. You go to Sam's, you buy a bunch of water. You think the police are going to find anything in the middle case, in the middle bottle? If there's an electronic device in that stack, Cash should hit on it immediately. We put a SIM card, you know how small those are, in a drop ceiling about that high, and he stopped and looked up. The sense of smell is just truly incredible, but it's just another tool. The trailer, I was talking to John at the Romeoville summit that we just had. It's your new beautiful facility. And I said, the sheriff has a truck hooked up to his. How'd you get this here? You pull it? And he says, no, we gotta hitch rides all the time. We don't have a truck. So I went back inside, I called Terry Darcy. I said, Terry, we gotta do this. We gotta get him a truck. So we're working on that right now. Hero's gonna kick in a third. I'm gonna kick in a third from the money I seize from drug dealers, and Terry kicks in his third, and they'll be able to get that thing out there every weekend and anybody that asks for it. But the key is, and reinforce with parents, that your child's bedroom is your bedroom. They don't own it. They don't own anything in it. And if you're not paying attention to what they have in it, you're not parenting properly. You know, this whole thing about, you know, being your child's buddy. We'd all like to be our child's buddy, but you can't. I mean, be their friend, their best friend, but at the same time, you have to be willing to cross a line and confront them with things. And I'll just segue into violent video games real quickly here. It's a passion of mine. I grew up in the 50s and 60s. Remember Andy and Mayberry? That's the most violent show I saw. There was no violence, okay? I wish I could take myself back or take myself forward and make myself a child now to see how I would turn out. I'm still squeamish to this day. I do not want to see someone suffer, and I do not want to see somebody hurt, and if I do, I go like this. What do they do today? They play video games where you inflict pain, you murder. This is a scourge on our community, and nobody is paying attention to it. These children that walk into schools and calmly shoot other children. TV, movies, violent video games. Didn't exist when I was a kid. Not at all. When Theismann's leg was broken on national television, I didn't see it live, and the replay came on, and I turned away. I did not want to see his leg go the wrong way. That's a normal human reaction. We're losing that. Now, that doesn't mean these kids just go out and start pillaging and hurting people, but they got a compassion deficit that we're building into them, and it can be triggered at any time. That kid that walked into the Texas school was not a bad kid. They said he wasn't a bad kid. He laughed and joked as he shotgunned and gunned down for half an hour. And then he wasn't one of the suicidal ones. He didn't want to die. So he went through all that, and now he's went back and, oh, geez, life is precious. I don't want to die. So we've got a vortex here. We've got to figure out, obviously, how to get some response, because we've had at least 3 shootings I know recently where the school resource officer stopped it. And you know, sadly, the person who came in to do all the carnage was killed. In one case, the person was wounded and they didn't die. But you can't count on just one resource officer in these huge schools that we have. I mean, look at like Plainfield East. It's like a college campus. So we've got to, and we can't arm the teachers either. I'm really segueing here. But we have to come up with a solution. Some of it has to do with ingress and egress. That last kid came with a trench coat. Well, you could easily ban trench coats. That way they can't hide a rifle under it. So there's a lot of common sense things that I know are in the works. But long term, anything you can do in your private life to stop your children from doing things. Have any of you ever watched what's in these violent video games? I mean, really watched it. I mean, it's just like I said with the pornography, it's the most depraved things you can ever imagine. Grand Theft Auto. Okay, it's not Grand Theft Auto, it's just stealing cars. No, it's not. It's 3 psychopathic killers. You can be any one of the 3. And I might note that in all these violent video games, 99% of them, the protagonist is a man. The women are victims. I've been fighting domestic violence my entire career. Started the domestic violence court in 1995. We're still dealing today with the same kind of pathetic cowardice that injures women on a daily basis. And these games will only make it worse. A young man, you know, we talk about learned behavior for domestic violence. In Grand Theft Auto, there's rape. There's one of my sons has some aptitude with video games, so I bought some of these games so they could show me what was in them. That's the only reason I know, because you don't see it on TV, you don't see it on the cover. The manufacturers are very clever. They don't put anything on the cover of the jacket that would tell you what's inside. There's just code and stuff and pictures that aren't that bad, but then when you get in it, it's just god-awful. There's one video game, and I can't remember the name. They have this guy strapped down, and a big spike comes right in his eye and goes right through his skull, and the graphics are so real. It looks like a real human being. And so if you inflict that injury, if you're the one that makes that happen, and you watch it, something's gone. I mean, something is amiss. This is something I'm really proud of, and this is a credit to my staff. I've got 70 attorneys that work for me now, and when I started in the office in 1982, I don't know, maybe there was 12, 15 attorneys max. We've been consistently 15 or 16 points above the state average in felony convictions here in Will County. So if you ever run into one of my assistants, tell them thank you, because they grind it out in the courtroom, and we do a really substantial, excellent job. I try very hard to make sure that there's no pride of authorship or territorial jealousies when we deal with law enforcement. We work in a symbiotic relationship so that we can get the bad guys. At the same time, I religiously protect a defendant's right to fair trial for a number of reasons. It's morally the right thing to do, and secondarily, if you don't do that, your cases come back on appeal. But I had 2 murder cases that I dismissed. In 1998, Juliet Chin was killed in Frankfort, Illinois. It's the only murder in the history of Frankfort, Illinois. And we indicted Barry McCarthy, her boyfriend, for the murder. We had evidence that there was aspirated blood on his pant leg, and we went forward. The aspirated blood would mean he was there when she died, as she was dying. So we're getting ready for trial. The defense never gave me anything to contradict that. But my partner and I were getting it ready for trial, and we're starting to question that finding. So I flew in Tom Bevel, who was one of the top blood spatter experts in the country, to look at our stuff, and he said, yeah, I agree with you, that's blood spatter. The Barry McCarthy said he had taken a rug off of his girlfriend when he found her dead on the floor, and her hand had fallen into the blood and spattered the wall. Would be post-mortem. And he said he was straddling her when that happened. Well, the blood on his pant leg looked like the blood on the wall from the fallen fist. And that's the basis upon which I dismissed the case. Took a lot of heat from the police. The next day, one of the police chiefs said, well, the charge may be dismissed, but we had the right guy. 6 years later, we caught the real killer. You don't get that kind of vindication normally in any profession, but I only say that because in my business, I have to make tough decisions that could cost me my job, and it did. I lost in 2000. That, along with some other things, including corruption out of Chicago. But you can't think about that. You remember Kevin Fox? Remember Riley Fox out of Wilmington? I inherited that case. Well, we found that the DNA didn't match. The next day, I was in court dismissing the case. I filed a motion saying I cannot prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. I didn't say he was innocent, but I reached that point where I couldn't prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I can't go forward. Again, half of the people understood, half of the people didn't. Believe it or not, 6 years later, my office participated in finding the real killer. You don't get that kind of redemption on decisions like that. And so I look at that, and I'll never stop doing that. I thrive on stress, which is just, drives my wife crazy. But, so I'm built for this job. The worse it is, the better I am. With Peterson, everybody in the world said, you can't prove that case. Your law is unconstitutional. What are you doing? You're crazy. Okay? Now, if I had been younger when that case came to the state's attorney's office, I don't know that I could have done it, I'll be honest with you. Because 3/4 of my attorneys were telling me we can't do it. The day that we indicted it, the vote was 8 to 10 of the attorneys not to indict it. Okay? So, but I knew in my heart, with the experience that I had, I also knew Drew Peterson since 1983. I knew who he was. I knew he was a sociopath or a psychopath. When I came back into office in 2005, I ran into Drew Peterson in my lobby. Again, I know him. I was out of office in '04 when he killed Kathleen Savio in February. So he sees me, Jim, how you doing? Big smile, yeah, what's going on, man? Gun, badge, uniform, state's attorney's office, the state's attorney who's no wimp, and he hasn't shown any signs of guilt. If you had killed somebody 10 months before and you ran into me, you'd be a little nervous, right? A little on edge? No. When he was riding with Reverend Shorey on a ride-along, Reverend Shorey's the one that had the testimony from Stacy. He said, hey, Reverend, I've done a lot of really horrible things in my life, but nothing ever bothers me. And I can rationalize anything I ever do. That's a psychopath, okay? And then that's the psychopath that Stacy found out about. And, we proved by a preponderance of the evidence that he killed Stacy in 2010. That was one of the requirements to get Stacy's statements in under the forfeiture by wrongdoing. And just so you understand, they said, well, that's hearsay. Do you know that there's 27 other hearsay exceptions in the statute? 27 more. So hearsay by itself doesn't mean it's not probative. And the concept behind forfeiture by wrongdoing is you cannot profit from your wrongdoing. You cannot murder a witness against you and then not have any testimony come in. So again, there still has to be reliable and probative. You can't just bring anything in. But when Drew Peterson said to Kathy, I'm going to kill you and make it look like an accident, and then you add in the fact that she was killed and it was made to look like an accident, that's pretty connected, pretty probative, pretty material. And we also had a witness who testified, a neuropathologist, Dr. Mary Case out of St. Louis. She's now 75 years old. She is the preeminent doctor in her field. And when we asked the jury, did you have any question whether or not Kathy Savio was murdered? And they said, no, Dr. Case. The whole defense theory was she slipped and fell in the tub and it was an accident. Well, I knew from day one when I looked at the picture of her body in this tiny little tub that it couldn't possibly be an accident. There was no blood on the wall. There was no blood above her body. She smashed her head against the wall, and there's no blood. So again, that's the toughest thing I've ever done, but I wouldn't trade it for a million years. I'd like to do it 10 more times. We were working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, constant, and it was the most thrilling thing I've ever done. And I never for a minute doubted. Every time we had a setback, we'd come back, and people would be going, oh my God, no. Here's what we got. Bang, bang, bang. We're going to win this. And we did. And then I also won it with many divine interventions. I'll give you an example. The Supreme Court of Illinois decided in my favor on the statements a week before I'm going to go to trial, after all the statements about I'm going to kill you and make it look like an accident had been excluded by the trial judge. Because without those, I probably wouldn't have won. But a lightning bolt comes down a week before trial, hands me this case, because see, if you start a trial, you're stuck. It's double jeopardy, right? So, and if the judge isn't going to rule for me, I lose the case, I'm done. Can never fix it. So I was able to appeal and get the statements in. I also had a person retire from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office with 30 years of experience in the appellate division who won the appeal for me on that case, and it was 16,000 pages. If I had dumped those 16,000 pages for appeal on our appellate prosecutor, they're an office like my office, and they've got lots of cases. If those attorneys had that fall on their lap, it might not have gone the way it went. And she did such an excellent job that the last line in the opinion is, we now must address the cumulative error argument, which we must dismiss because we find there are no errors. I've never seen that written that way in an appellate court opinion before. So the people that came to me, Dr. Mary Case, the way I found her, they did not have a neuropathologist on their side. They had some half-baked pathologists who gave ridiculous opinions, and she just stood above the fray. But how I found her was so unique, and all these things were meant to happen. And I'll just say this: if you're doing the right thing for the right reason, and you do it with passion, and you really believe in it, things will happen to help you. I've had many setbacks. Like I said, I lost an election, but you just keep your head down and keep doing the right thing for the right reason, and things will break your way. thank you for listening today. And if you ever have any questions or if you'd like to take a tour of our Child Ad Center, that's open anytime. And really, it would be inspiring if you did that. I think if you see what we're offering to these young children, and I just want to quickly go into how that works. When we interview the child, we only do one interview. And we do it in a neutral, non-suggestive manner so that a false allegation can't slip through. We have an assistant state's attorney who's trained in this field. We have an investigator and a DCFS worker watching on Video Connect in two-way radio communication with the interviewer, so we get the most thorough interview possible. The other three are constantly commenting to the interviewer, explore this area, go this way, go that way. But the interviewer never starts out like, when did the offender touch you there? The moment you do that, you've suggested what you want to hear and you're done. And in the old days, I started, in 1982, as I told you. In '85, I prosecuted a case out of Lockport where an 11-year-old girl was sexually assaulted by her mother's boyfriend while she slept on the couch. She didn't report it for 3 months until she saw a TV show where the same kind of thing happened in the TV show, and she burst out into tears and made an outcry. That's my case. I've got no physical evidence. I got no eyewitnesses. I got no prompt outcry. But this little girl was so on the money with everything she said. And there was also another case where he was charged with molesting 2 other children in the neighborhood. That case went to trial first, not guilty. Then I had my case. And we won our case. The offender wrote a letter from prison saying, thanks for catching me. I had a problem. The reason I tell that story is 10 years later, I'm state's attorney, and that little 11-year-old girl is now 21 years old. She's thrown out of a moving vehicle by her boyfriend, and he was not a good person, I'll just say, and wound up going to prison. But she had, numerous broken bones, and she told my victim services person to say hi to me because we had this case. And when I heard that, it just shuddered, because we didn't have a child ad center back then. And that wasn't the norm, that a case like that would even be charged, let alone prosecuted. Because what would normally happen is the child would make a statement to one person, a statement to another, a statement to, and they all were different. And when if you're on a jury and the defense attorney brings out, well, you said this, and you said this, and you said this, you couldn't convict. You'd have to do, even though you might feel badly for the child, you'd have to follow the law. And so most of those cases were never even charged. So in 1995, when we got the Child Ad Center open, it was a godsend. In fact, a year in, there was one of the best detectives from county who walked up to me with a big smile on his face and said, Jim, this place is a godsend. Because he'd been a detective for 20 years trying to interview children on these cases and having them fall by the wayside. And now these predators were getting caught and prosecuted effectively. So, but please, it's right across from the county building. You can just do a walk-in, or you can call and set something up. Maybe the chamber could do a tour. I think it'd be really well worth your while. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call my office about anything, and we'll try and help you. Thank you.
Oops. The labs have a particular affinity for this kind of work?
Sorry, the cord stuck to my foot. I'm sorry?
The dogs are all Labrador Retrievers.
Yes.
Does that breed have a particular affinity for working with children?
Yes, they're very calming. They're very controllable. The other two are English labs. They're a little shorter, a little stockier. Their coat's a little thicker, but they're of a similar disposition. But the funniest thing is Jackson, because I love Jackson. And when Jackson comes up and he looks at you, you just can't help but pet him. And he was doing really good in the leader dog for the blind school, except every time he saw a squirrel or a rabbit, ping, he'd take off. And can you imagine, in a busy intersection, and the man it wouldn't work. So, but he's been an absolutely phenomenal therapy dog. And we now have a law in Illinois, by the way, where a child under 18 can have the dog on the witness stand in the courtroom and they testify. That's huge. We've had it done 3 times. The judge has to make a determination that the child will give a more truthful testimony with the dog present, and that goes into having the child being calm and being able to think straight and give a clean answer. When they have to go into a courtroom, the defendant has a right to be there. Think about that. If you're a 6-year-old child and you have to get up in the witness stand and the person who did that horrible thing to you is there, So I know there's a bill pending where it might be able to be that that individual would have to be in the other room with his attorney, and it would be done video. But that's difficult because we have a right to confront witnesses against us under our Constitution. Okay, thank you.
No? Thank you. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. We appreciate your time.